Hi there, Kathleen.
Hi.
I'm talking today with my friend Kathleen, who is, we've never worked together professionally, but we've kind of known each other online for a while and I think been
Yeah,
mutual admirers in
for
the
sure.
intuitive eating community. So
hmm
I wanted to talk to you a little bit today about yoga and body image, because I know you're also a yoga instructor and you have a lot of stuff going on, not only online, but, in your hometown in New Jersey. So can you just tell me a little bit about your journey to through intuitive eating and self-acceptance and how yoga played a part in that?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you a lot about my journey.
I'm sure you can.
So if I'm giving too much detail, feel free to move me along. But
Okay.
yeah, so basically, I found intuitive eating after 20 years of
Mhm.
chronic dieting. And that started when I was a teenager at 16. I had been emotionally eating since age 11 due to trauma and had put on
Right.
a bunch of weight and was really feeling the social pressures of that and decided at 16 to go on a very restrictive diet. Really looked a lot
Mhm.
like anorexia, to be honest. But well, maybe more exercise bulimia is
Mhm.
probably
Yeah.
the way I'd put it, because I was someone that after that initial phase of really starving my body and getting a lot of praise for
Yeah.
that, right? I lost a lot of weight in a short period of time. I was praised by my parents and friends alike. And, and it was something that was highly encouraged, that my
Mhm.
willpower to run literally 4 miles a day before I'd allow myself a single calorie.
Right.
Um, then I was encouraged to, at least I luckily stepped off the starvation train, but then I started on dieting. So Weight Watchers was really my diet of choice.
Mhm.
I always seem to go back to that, Weight Watchers, because my mother had lost tons of weight, 100 pounds on Weight Watchers in the 80s, of course, then putting it back on slowly over the next 5 years, as is biologically predictable. But at the time, it was a huge success, and felt very that this was a good thing. So I stepped
Mhm.
on that train, and then tried over the next 20 years, pretty much you name it.
Yeah.
Um, and then and then in those 20 years, I got married. I had 2 kids, and it was the birth of my second son in 2013 was a traumatic birth, and it put me, so I was in a situation where not only did I have the normal pregnancy weight that most women deal with, but then I was put on medications for my severe anxiety
Okay.
that caused me to put on additional weight. So,
Mhm.
and as somebody who had only ever associated self-worth with how my body
Mhm.
looked, I mean, at that point, at that weight, it was just, my whole life was consumed with the idea that if I didn't lose this weight, I could never be happy and I could
Right.
never be healthy. And
Yeah.
and I had an angel of a therapist in 2015 named Susan, who very gently suggested to me that there was a different way. And have I read this book, Intuitive Eating? And it took me a few times to
Mhm.
hear it before I really heard it.
Yep.
And I heard, what I heard was it was an alternative to what I was doing. And at that
Mhm.
point, dieting works for a short time, well, for a while, but after 20 years, it doesn't even work in the short term
Right.
anymore. So what was happening was I was on a combination of Weight Watchers and Nutrisystem preparing for a wedding, and I was gaining weight
Right.
every week,
Yep.
and I was so miserable. And it was,
Mhm.
and it was my number one priority to lose the weight when I talked to my therapist, despite all the other crap going on in my life,
Right.
like having
Right.
2 children. And, number one was losing weight. And I'll never forget her, or I can't thank her enough for her persistence and just keep saying it, keep
Mhm.
saying it. So,
Yep.
so finally I read it, and it was like, literally my mind was blown.
Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't believe what I was reading. I couldn't believe that these women had somehow transported themselves into my body,
Mhm. Yes. Yeah.
into my brain, and told and explained everything in a totally different way,
Mhm.
and saw me, allowed me to see a truth I couldn't see before. And
Right.
I was all in. Like, I really, truly, after 20 years of experimenting in the diet binge cycle,
Mhm.
I knew that these women were right. I knew that they were onto something, and I was willing to try it, despite all of the um, calls to you're crazy,
right.
your highest weight ever. What do you mean you're not going back on Weight Watchers?
Mm-hmm.
So there was a lot of external pressure, and people like you, very frankly, helped me stay the course.
Good.
Because early on I was able to find an online community that resonated with me in this way. And as I had said before, the main thing, I always, after that initial period, I always was someone who ate, I wasn't starving myself. I was eating within point structures and counting my calories and all that shit. But the way I compensated for my lack of willpower when I would binge was through intense exercise.
Right. Yeah.
So I had tried, my go-to, I was like a step aerobics queen. I was in the front of the class with the 2 steps, and I knew all the choreography. And and that was a way, that I controlled my weight for a while. And then, and if I wasn't on that, I was on the Stairway to Nowhere or the treadmill, or I kind of had this arbitrary limit or rule of 800 calories is what I had to burn in a day at the gym before I could leave. So that was like 2 really long sessions on like an elliptical and something else. So I lived in that space for a long time. And then and then professionally, before I became a yoga teacher, I'm a physical therapist, and I've been a PT. It'll be almost 20 years and 18 years now. But, so at the time I was not only doing this behavior for myself, but I was, in some ways prescribing this to my, to my patients as, a healthy lifestyle. And what intuitive eating helped me realize was how disordered my relationship with exercise also was. So that gave me the power to quit the gym. For the first time in 20 years, I wasn't paying for a gym membership. And it also, because specific to yoga, yes, I had tried yoga before this, and I hated yoga.
Yeah. So much, because it's like, oh, I didn't get my heart rate up, or I didn't sweat or whatever,
Well, what the reason I really hated it is because I was trying the vinyasa classes that were in the 100 or Bikram classes that were in the 110 degree heated room. And I have a real heat intolerance. So not only was that way too much, and I'm not naturally flexible. Even now, I'm not a flexible person. So, so just being in this room where I felt like I was going to pass out, and I couldn't do half the physical practice. And, I just, every time I left the room, I was like, screw that yoga.
Right. Exactly.
But at the same time, the reason I tried it so many times, I honestly think the number is 7. The reason I tried it so many times, besides the great calorie burn, was because it made me feel better. And and it was like this cognitive dissonance between, how does something that I hate so much make me feel better?
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So it kind of kept pulling me back to it, little like and then when I in 2015 quit dieting, and for a whole year literally didn't move my body, in any way beyond your normal daily activities, just worked on my relationship with food, and really doing the work of intuitive eating. When I decided I needed joyful movement in my life, honestly, I joined this gym called Lifetime because it had childcare and a pool.
What else do you need?
I had no interest in the gym floor whatsoever. And the only thing that caught my eye was the yoga room in the back. And it was like, I've tried that before, but I've never tried it from this vantage point. And, maybe there are other styles that I haven't tried, and fine, I'll give it a shot. And what I met my teacher, Alex, and I met the style yin that really healed me.
Right. Yeah.
And yin, if you haven't done it, is completely the opposite of what you're, what I just described with being in the 110 degree room and bending yourself like a pretzel. Yin is very meditative, which frankly, at the first yin class I ever took, I also hated.
Right.
And I remember, like, my youngest son, who was 1 to 2 range, I got called from the kids academy, like in the middle of the class. I think in pigeon pose, like hating life, and thinking, what in the flipping hell did I get myself into? There was this stupid yoga again. And I was pulled out of the class. I was pulled out of the class by a childcare, and I wanted to hug her.
Right. Thank God.
And I stayed away from that yin for a few months, and I tried something called root, and that's where and at the end of root, which was a much slower form of yoga, it definitely had a much different vibe than that, like, you know, one breath, one movement, sweaty flow, and it just had a much more like embodied, you know, a practice. And then he would always end in yin, and once I experienced yin in like 10 minutes, I started, like, you know, opening myself up to, like, well, maybe I'll try that whole class again. And once I really, because meditation changes the brain. It does, you know, it's a back door to brain health. So if you spend 60 minutes on a regular basis meditating, you know, because a yin class, at least in our style, you start with 10 minutes of meditation, and then you flow into just very simple, or, you know, maybe not so simple, grounded poses. But my classes are simple. I'm all about accessible yoga, you know, grounded poses that are meant to just get you out of your thinking head and into your feeling body and into this present moment where you are safe.
Yeah.
You know?
And I see that in so many people, like there's a disconnect between like what your brain wants you to do and like what your body needs, you know, and I really feel like yoga like reestablishes that connection, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I say all the time to my clients in my intuitive eating group, you know, your body is way smarter than you.
Right.
You know, you are not nearly as wise as your body, you know, because your ego is going to tell you 1,000 stories. Your mind's going to tell you 1,000 stories about why you shouldn't do that, or why you don't have time for that, or why that's too hard, or why you're too fat, or why you're too, you know, but if you do it, if you just go through that obstacle of, you know, pushing through the ego and just say and do it, your body's going to tell you this is something good for you, right? Like, just like my body did those 7 times, even though I didn't like it on an intellectual level, my body knew it was good for me.
Right. You were still called back to it, which is really interesting. How do you make yoga accessible for people in larger bodies?
So, so that's something I'm super passionate about. And that comes from a few places. One, you know, as a physical therapist, you know, I have been, accessibility is what I do, right? Like I take, you know, disabilities or temporary injuries, and I help problem solve how someone can move and participate in life anyway, you know? So, you know, so I certainly have that background. And just, you know, I'm a very, you know, I don't ever make assumptions about people, you know, like, you know, and I think that, you know, I always look at a situation. I never make an assumption about someone based on their body, because I've seen people in larger bodies do incredible things. I've seen people in disabled bodies do incredible things that I would never attempt, much less achieve.
Right.
You know, so I've learned over the years that assumptions are crap, and, you know, you never know from looking at someone what they're capable of. And then with intuitive eating, just the real understanding that dieting is the cause of this obesity crisis, not the fucking cure for it. I'm sorry, am I allowed to say that? Slipped out. It's not, you know, so this understanding that people in larger bodies are the victims of this culture, not the, you know, they shouldn't be opting into it. They need to opt the hell out. You know, you know, and then my feminism, obviously you can say I'm the feminist yogi. You know, my feminism has been present, much to my father's chagrin, since I could talk. And, you know, just this idea that women are put under these incredibly ridiculous standards that simply don't exist for men. And, you know, and that everybody is deserving of feeling good, of understanding its inherent goodness, and of the trust that I don't care what your body looks like, you can trust it. You really can.
I think what's happened with yoga, which is disappointing, because it's really not necessarily just about the body movements, you know, it's like breath work and all other kinds of stuff, right? And I think it's kind of been co-opted by this fitness culture, right? Like you think of someone going to yoga and like spandex, cute ponytail, you know, like and I think it's really intimidating for people who might not have, you know, socially acceptable body types to think, oh, I can go into a class like that and I can be accepted and I can fit in and I can do the work. So what would you say to someone like that who's thinking about starting yoga and doesn't just feel comfortable even like broaching that?
Well, any good teacher worth their weight is going to tell you right off the bat that this is a breathing class first and foremost. Mm-hmm. That if you are breathing, you are doing yoga. And the difference is breathing with intention, right? Like, of course, we're always breathing, but usually it's your autonomic nervous system that's in control of that, and you don't take intentional breaths. So, but because it's an autonomic function that we have control over, that if we turn our attention to, we can control.
Right.
It makes it tremendously powerful to the nervous system. Mm-hmm. So, so the first part of accessible yoga is just realizing that you're only there to breathe, and everyone can do that, you know, and that the options, the movements really are optional. And if you are moving in a yoga class, it's because you are moving with your breath. Right. Okay. So you're taking an inhale and you're lifting, and you're taking an exhale and you're lowering. Mm-hmm. In a yin class, like we've talked about, I'm not cueing every breath because there's very little movement in a yin class, but I am going to constantly remind you of your breath. And it's that attention to your breathing that makes you feel changed. It's not anything to do with the bendy poses. It's not anything to do with the fancy poses. You truly don't have to do any poses. It's all about the breath. And then just as far as, so I'm not, in addition to being a physical therapist and obviously a yoga teacher, I did take an additional certification for accessible yoga. And that is, and it showed, solidified a lot of the things I knew, showed me some new techniques about using props, bolsters, blankets, blocks, straps, to modify any pose for your body, and how your body is, it's about getting your body to an edge and not worrying about what it looks like. In fact, my yoga studio, the one that I practice in, and anyone in the future that I'm, that might have my name tied to it, will never have a mirror in the room because it's not about what it looks like.
Right.
It's all about what it feels like. And you are only there to close your eyes and look inside and have this feeling experience with your body and your breath.
Right.
And and it is tremendously powerful.
I think that's really important. I feel like I've talked to a lot of women who are like, I can never go into a room and like lie down on the floor and like bend, like do different things. It's just like not possible. So,
I used to be one of those people.
Right. Exactly.
Honestly, I had never tried anything like yin before. I had tried only like those sweaty vinyasa classes, as I said. And the last 5 minutes of Shavasana is how any yoga class ends, right? It's just you, after a yoga practice, the most important pose, I didn't know that at the time, but the most important pose is letting go of all muscular effort and lying completely flat on the floor, legs and arms wide, and just breathing, meditating. Meditation is the ultimate goal of yoga.
Right.
So, so the first time that I, when in those times when I was doing yoga, I would literally at the end, when everyone was laying there, I'd be like, what in the hell is everyone doing? Right. I got places to go and people to see.
Rest time.
And which was honestly bullshit. Because of course I had places to go and people to see, but not 5 minutes. Anyone can spare 5 minutes. It was the being with myself that was intolerable.
Right. Exactly.
Because my anxiety at that point in my life was so high. On a daily basis. Like I stepped out of the bed and I was at a 6 or 7 out of 10, so the stopping, the really removing all the distractions and the feeling, I mean, it's not always easy, it really isn't. But it's, growth is not comfortable. Like discomfort is another word for change,
right?
So like if you want to change, you have to be willing to get uncomfortable.
And the slowing down is so hard, especially in this day and age when we're so used to like this constant bombardment from media and just interaction with people. And it can, I've seen that a lot with my clients. It's hard to just sit for 20 minutes and close your eyes. If I try to do a hypnosis session with someone or, a guided meditation, it's like they can't even sit still and not be doing something. It's very difficult.
Well, I'm embarrassed to admit it. I signed up for YTT. The yoga practice that I started, when I really dedicated myself in 2016, it was so powerful and had such a profound effect on my mental health that I signed up for YTT almost immediately. And I was in YTT within yoga teacher training within 6 months. So, and I had no idea how much meditating would be involved. No idea. I don't know that I would have done it because at that point, and this is not an exaggeration, the first night, and this is a combination of just the normal anxiety I walked around in and the fact that I was nervous, right? It's the first night of a huge 9-week undertaking, 200 hours of training, brand new group of people. I'm the heaviest person in the room. Like there was a lot of, nerves around it. And so I literally could not close my eyes. When he told me to do it, I couldn't do it. And my eyes were fluttering. And I was like, and I'm looking around at the rest of them just closing their eyes, and I'm in awe. I'm in awe of them that they can do it, and in awe of myself that I can't, So it's very real. And what I would say to anyone struggling like that is just don't force yourself to do 20 minutes. Literally try 2 minutes, and don't force yourself to close your eyes. Look down, just like lower your gaze, soften your gaze, make your gaze less focused so you can go a little bit more inward, so there's a lot of ways to modify a practice for you. And I'll say it to I got this, from my teacher, Alex, and I say it to my class, you are the best, your body's the best teacher in this room. I can't teach you what your body's telling you. I can give you suggestions about what you might be feeling. And I can tell you the point of being here is to breathe, and that all these other movements are totally optional, but only you know if this movement works in your body. And only you know if you can close your eyes without feeling unsafe. And only So, those are just things that any good, accessible yoga teacher is going to be, able to help you with.
Would you suggest if there's somebody listening to this who's like wants to try yoga but feels really uncomfortable about it and really nervous, like, do you think a good thing to do is like to go up and talk to the teacher beforehand, or is that super annoying to you?
I would probably even, before you're in the place where you're actually speaking to the teacher in a class you're about to take, I'd probably call the studio.
Okay.
Call the studio ahead of time, ask what their classes are like, ask questions, how do you modify for people in bigger bodies? If they say, what are you talking about? Don't go. Ask what teachers are more seasoned or might be better able to help someone who's brand new and, and nervous. And just go in with the knowing that you work for them. I mean, they work for you. Sorry. That you're hiring them, not the other way around, So, so I would be preemptive about that. And then just maybe looking at the schedule, looking at the different types of yoga, really figuring out what they are and if that's supportive of your goals. Generally yin and yang are the two types, so yang is going to be a little bit more active, and yin, as I have discussed, is way more meditative. And, and there's restorative yoga, which, a yin practice is actually not restorative. Yin practice, you do want to, generally speaking, find an edge. So it's a little bit of a practice based in discomfort and breathing through that, whereas a restorative practice is literally just like you are chilling out. Or yoga nidra is sleep yoga. I mean, there are so many options, and none is better than the other. It doesn't, just because your friend or neighbor goes to, vinyasa and has 6-pack abs doesn't make your yoga practice any less real because it happened on an app on your phone 10 minutes before bed, Yeah, and I would also, for home practice, I do highly recommend an app called Down Dog.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah, because it's excellent, and there's there's so many YouTube videos available, and it's just a matter of picking and choosing who resonates with you.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good tip. Thank you. Because I think that's another thing that we all need to be worried about right now is finding ways to do this kind of stuff at home, so.
And then also the Headspace app and the Calm app, not for yoga, but for meditation. As I've said, that's the point of yoga. So if you just want to go ahead with advanced practice and start meditating, then, Headspace is free. Calm has a fee associated with it, but it is, at least with Calm, which I'm more familiar with, there's a daily 10-minute meditation that is always great. You know, it's
Yeah.
a nice guided meditation. So, you know, yeah, because meditation is very accessible, and know that you don't have to sit cross-legged on the floor. You can sit in a chair with a back on it. You can lay in bed and meditate. You might fall asleep. You know, if you're not looking to fall asleep, maybe don't lay down.
Right.
But if you're trying to sleep, meditating is a great way to get there.
Yeah, and guided meditation is a good thing to do when you're first starting out, because it's really hard, you know, to just sit and do nothing. You know what I mean? Which is what it feels like. So those apps are really helpful. It gives you something to.
And there's also so many different ways to meditate. You know, I tend to meditate on my breath, or, you know, with a guided app. But there's mantra meditation, and there's, you know, and like tapping and things I know that you teach. Those are all forms of meditation too. You know,
exactly.
Let's say it this way: meditation is a form of mindfulness, but there's millions of forms of mindfulness. And mindfulness is really the key. You know, mindfulness in all areas of your life will change for the better.
Absolutely. And with relation to body image, I think, you know, just really establishing that connection, getting back into your body, which is what I see so many women struggle with. It's like, I don't want to think about my body. I'm disgusted by it. It's betraying me, you know, and being able to like move back into that and feel some calmness and some peace in your body, you know,
and love for that body. I mean, I know, yes, I lived in that space for so long, and it's so painful to even have you say it as a hypothetical now, because, you know, your body, you know, now those of us who do eat intuitively and have felt the difference between trust and fear, right?
Right, exactly.
Know how, you know, how beautiful it feels to just let go of the idea that your body's anything less than perfect.
Right. Exactly.
And that it's not been there for you every step of the way, and it's highly, you know, highly deserving of care and love and respect, no matter what it looks like. And that those things, giving it that care, love, and respect, are going to make you feel the way you thought weight loss would make you feel.
Exactly. Right. That's what you were after all along.
That's what you were after all along, was to feel loved and cared for by yourself.
Yes.
You know, so it's such this beautiful, you know, it's like a catch-22, but like, you know, like if you don't love it, it's never going to be there for you. It's never going to love you back. And if you do love it, you're going to be amazed at what your body is capable of.
And you can be happy no matter what. You don't need to think first.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's so important. Well, thank you so much for talking with me today. This was very helpful and enlightening to me. And I know probably a lot of people who are going to watch this, where yoga just can feel so intimidating. And I think it's really helpful to hear all about the other aspects of it, you know, and what it really means.
Yeah, no, so, I used to live there, so I totally understand the intimidation factor. And, you know, and there are going to be teachers that are going to make it intimidating, you know, so just, you know, make sure that you, you know, you're shrewd if you're looking to start something, you know, in looking for a class that really honors your goals and your abilities, and, you know, what you want to get out of it. And don't, you know, don't be afraid to try something totally new or walk out in the middle of it. Or,
exactly. You know, like really advocate for yourself. Exactly.
Absolutely. And you know, yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for inviting me. This was a lot of fun.
Before you go really quick, I was just typing this in your group. So you have a Facebook group that I'm also in called Intuitive Eating Radical Acceptance. And it's, I think it's different than other Facebook groups, because there's a lot of really big groups out there that kind of have like a lot of rules and a lot of like, can't talk about this, can't talk about that. But I think yours is much more open and accepting. What's your?
I think that the biggest difference I put for our group is that it's a group for committed intuitive eaters.
Right.
So
exactly.
I'm not necessarily looking to entertain. Hey, I gained some weight and I'm really freaked out. You know, those are like, you know, I don't want to put too fine a point on it, but people who aren't still trying to figure out if dieting is right for them.
Exactly.
Right?
Like,
you know, are they still on the fence of this dieting intuitive eating thing? Probably not best for our group. You know, but we don't require trigger warnings, and, you know, and the other thing I think that makes the group unique is I do ask for a monthly check-in, even if that's as simple as a hear or a like of the post, just so that the group stays relatively intimate and we know that the people there are actually actively participating, and you know, they're familiar faces and names to us all. So thank you for that. I didn't bring that up myself. Please join us because it's so important, especially now. There's so many freaking jokes about this quarantine 15 and just get out of that headspace and into a place of like, now more than ever, we need to be loving and caring for ourselves.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for being here with me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Teddy. Always a pleasure.
I'm just